Welcome to episode 44.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
It's a new year, and if you're like me, you are already thinking about warmer weather and taking that getaway to that tropical or exotic destination. Maybe you plan to travel to Walt Disney World or Universal Studios. No matter what kind of trip you plan, 3D Travel Company is the company for you. Just visit 3dtravelcompany.com and let them know that Trenton sent you from Who Did That Voice. Or you can book on www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips booked and traveled by the end of 2017. Book today and travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. All February long of 2017, we will be covering the original Deke release Sailor Moon animated series from the 1990s, and today's special guest is Sailor Jupiter.
You want trouble, pal? You're looking at it. My name is Trouble. I'm Sailor Jupiter. On behalf of Jupiter, I call upon the forces of thunder and lightning to vanquish this evil. Supreme thunder! Crash!
So sweet.
Wait, this is rigged!
Hey, Lita?
What?
I'd like to introduce you to two of my friends,
Hi.
Amy and Ray. You guys, this is my new friend, Lita.
Hello.
Oh, and who are you?
Wow, he's exactly like my old boyfriend.
Oh, not that again. I thought Joe looked like your old boyfriend.
He's dreamy.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Susan Roman joining us. Susan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It is completely my pleasure, Trenton. This is going to be fun because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is voiceovers and animation. So it's perfect.
Absolutely. And voiceover is such a broad term that people don't always realize. And that's part of the reason we created this show, or I created this show. And so I'm glad we're going to get to dive into that a little bit with you here today, Susan. And thank you so much for your valuable time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, absolutely my pleasure.
Well, Susan, the very first thing we always like to do is just to get a little brief story on who Susan Roman is. And just, tell people who my special guest is. Who was Susan Roman growing up into the woman that she became? And how did you get into the voiceover industry, Susan?
Well, I started out, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be an actress. I mean, that was, from the time I can possibly remember. So when I finished high school, I went to theater school. So I have a theatrical background and theatrical training, which has really stood me in good stead, I would say. And I started doing a lot of programming. So I'm Canadian, so obviously a lot of the things that I would have done might not be known to people outside of the country. But I did a lot of, film and television. I actually, when I was in my late 20s, I had my own television series on CBC.
Oh, wow.
And, it was fun. That lasted about three or 4 years. And then one day, kind of around that time, my agent said to me, would you be interested in auditioning for an animated project that's on the go? And I said, oh, sure. That sounds great. So in I went, and I think it was for Nelvana, which was the major animation house in Canada at the time. And I went to the audition, and I got the part, and I went in and recorded. I don't remember what it was, actually. Maybe it was a strawberry shortcake. I don't remember. But after that, I started... I don't know if you can hear my dog drinking in the background.
I actually could. I was like, what is that? Kind of sounds like a lapping sound.
He's a big dog. He's a big black lab, and for some reason he's decided... And when he takes a drink, it's not just a couple of little gentle sips. Okay, that's good,
He's
Truman.
a big boy, needs a drink.
He's a big boy. Okay, that's it. Thank you. So after that, I started to do, go in and read for a lot more animated projects. And started getting more and more projects under my belt, and then a couple of series. And really, really liked it because, and I was also doing radio and television voiceover and announcing as well. And so it's a lot more interesting to, well, you kind of get to flex your muscles and use your training when you're doing animation, as opposed to, you know, presenting price points for chicken legs. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, chicken legs this week, only 14 whatever, is not as challenging or as fun as doing animation. And in those days, all of the animation, I mean 100% of it that I was involved with was original animation. So we recorded before it was drawn, and it was drawn to our voices. So there's an incredible amount of freedom when you work that way, because you are truly creating the character, and then the animator does his or her part by, you know, creating the visual of the character, but you have provided, I think, a really important essence of the character with your voice, and also, you know, whatever else you can bring, your heart and your soul. And so it was very collaborative. And you know, the director, the producer, the actor, the animator, we were all working towards the same end, which was to make it as fantastic as possible. And then later on, it was later on that animation started coming into the country that had already been done and that had to be dubbed. And when you dub something, a project, you are completely hamstrung, because you have to keep the pace, the rhythm, the speed that has already been established. So if in my heart, if I wanted to say, oh, I think that's so great, if I wanted to say it at that speed, but my character is talking 89 miles a minute, then I've lost my creative input. The only thing I can do is try to do it as well as I can in a very, very fast time period, right? So all of a sudden it's going to change just because of the speed as opposed to the interpretation. So then it's, oh, I think that's really great. So all of a sudden you've lost a little bit of that impulse that is uniquely yours, and you have to follow into somebody else's rhythm. And then if you're doing an animated project that has been done in another language, the rhythm is all over the place, of course. So it's interesting that there is so much more dubbed material now, and it's hard to do as an actor. I think it's incredibly difficult to do well. And whenever a cartoon comes along, or an animated project comes along that's an original one, all of us, I mean, I'm sure you could ask any actor on the globe if they'd rather do a dubbed project or an original project, and I'm sure that most everyone would say an original project, just because of the latitude and the freedom. That's the long answer.
Well, that's wonderful. I really appreciate you going into depth, because, you know, that's one of the things that I say will happen on my shows, that we'll take an in-depth look. So, you know, divulging that kind of information is fantastic, you know, and it's really cool to know that, you know, when you're doing an animation project that's new, you're really building the framework for what the animators and people on the show will see, you know, and, you know, saying that you're able to more express yourself through the character, because you can take it at what speed you need, or make it how you feel it should come across according to how the director says it and how you are kind of feeling it, you know, and versus having to kind of speed through it, you know, and be like, wow, that would have been so much nicer if we could have slowed that pacing down. But based on, you know, something like an anime that you've worked on, just, you have to keep up with that faster pace, and then you're kind of feeling like you're conforming versus being able to be free as an actor. So
exactly. No, you hit the nail right on the head. Pardon me, right on the head. That's exactly the situation that comes up. And so it's, as I said, it's deceptively difficult to do it well.
Yeah.
And you know, you're always having to match the lip flaps. And if you look at some of the anime that comes in from Japan, the lip movements are they're more horizontal. Our lip, in a North American animation, the lip movements will be rounder, probably because based on our language. If you looked at our lips when we're talking, I guess that, those are the movements that we see when somebody is speaking English. So when somebody is speaking Japanese, the lip movements are not necessarily going to correlate to ours. And especially when we have things to say like, wow, or oh, no, and the lip movement is on a horizontal. So you're going, oh, no, which is a big round sound, and then you look up at the screen and the characters' lips are moving horizontally or sideways. So then, then you're kind of stuck. So the line is, oh, no, but it's not going to, the lip movement's not going to match at all. So then you have to just squeeze your mouth and kind of go, oh, no! You see what I'm saying? So you can hear I've squeezed it into a more flatter opening.
To where it makes it sound more appropriate for what you're visually seeing. That's fantastic. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, that it is. It's kind of like learning by the seat of your pants, because I think we were, we were one of the first outfits in North America to dub an anime. So in it comes, and we're all in the dark because, first of all, nobody knew what anime was.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I had ever dubbed from a foreign language, an animated project from a foreign language. I think I had dubbed some things that were from England or other English-speaking countries, but when it comes in another language entirely, that we were we were paddling up the stream, going, okay, what do we do now? So it was a learning experience at the beginning. I can tell you.
Absolutely.
I go home and go, oh, this is really hard.
So some of the forerunners of what anime has become, kind of establishing that format as well. Then.
Oh, exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It was really something.
Well, we are going to talk more about your anime project in a moment, and we will unveil the name. But back between 1983 and 94, you played a couple of different characters on several different renditions of Strawberry Shortcake. You played Crepe Suzette, Blueberry Muffin, Peach Blush, and the Berry Princess on a couple of different versions, as I mentioned, of Strawberry Shortcake. And what was it like working on that show that has now become such an icon for so many people, Susan?
Well, that was just a really sweet little, so sweet. And as I said, I'm pretty sure that one of my first auditions was for Strawberry Shortcake. And I always want to call it Strawberry Cupcake. I have no idea. I have to keep stopping myself. That was where I sort of learned the ropes doing those episodes. One thing that I have to say is, and it's because it still remains one of my favorites, and every once in a while I'll go back and listen to it, is so the other characters were little sort of incidentals, and then one day I actually got a lead character, which was the Berry Princess, and I thought I had just landed in heaven, because because I remember when I was a kid, that was any sort of princess was, kind of mind-boggling and fantastic. But the fact that I actually got to do the voice of a princess the way I imagined a princess should sound was really, really gratifying. And even to this day, I listen to it, and it's got a little kind of that retro 40s, 50s, the way they used to talk in those days. There was maybe a little bit more of, I don't want to say an accent, but I always think of, those 40s films. Oh, but darling, can't you stay for dinner? They've got that kind of weird R sound in there.
Yeah. And
if you listen to this, it sounds kind of like that. So I think that I was influenced by maybe, Hanna-Barbera, Walt Disney, or whatever was in my mind as a child. And then I got to actually recreate it as an adult. And I listen back to it and I say to myself, you know, it's really, really old-fashioned, and I love it. And you did a good job, kid.
That's awesome.
And as I say, that this was like a million years ago.
Well, it was the elegance of those eras that was coming through in your character.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'll take that.
Well, you know, because those older eras, you know, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, there was just an elegance, you know, and kind of what you were saying of bringing those aspects from your childhood into that princess. You know, it really was a form of elegance, not an accent like you said, but just that, hello, darling, you know, welcome to the party, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So fantastic. That's really special to hear. And what was it like getting to work with Russi Taylor on that show?
We didn't, again, in very often we ended up working by ourselves singly.
Okay.
So I rarely worked with her. No, I can't even remember. Yeah, it's mostly, especially because I used to do incidentals. I would go in on Strawberry Shortcake. This is before I ever had a series. I would just go in. I would do my little part, and it would take 15 or 20 minutes, and then I would go home. So it was that sort of thing.
I understand,
so
totally.
Not a lot of contact there.
Okay. Well, and for people who wonder who Russi Taylor is, she did play Strawberry Shortcake on the show, but you would better know her now today as Minnie Mouse. So, and
and she did it brilliantly too. It was just delightful.
Yeah. I mean, those shows were pretty iconic. I grew up with those just because back in the day, there weren't thousands of cartoons like there are nowadays. There were only so many on, and they didn't run necessarily forever, so new shows would come when those would stop because they didn't necessarily run as long as shows do now either.
Right.
And I remember growing up with Strawberry Shortcake and a lot of different shows from my childhood that were just very iconic because that's what every kid watched because there were just a limited number of shows back then compared to now.
Exactly.
Amazing for its time for sure, and it still holds its value all these years later because they, boys and girls today still love Strawberry Shortcake and her friends.
Oh, listen, absolutely, and I mean, again, part of that era, or maybe you were too old at this point. It was the Care Bear series as well.
I was still a kid. I was born in '85, so.
Oh, okay, perfect. So did you watch the Care Bears as well?
I loved Care Bears with a passion.
Good. That's what I like to hear. Now that's Nelvana again, the same company that did Strawberry Shortcake.
Okay.
And I guess this was a couple of years later. And after my little foray into learning the art of animation through Strawberry Shortcake, I did get a continuing role. I played Champ Bear on Care Bears. So that went on for 2 or 3 years, I think. I'm not quite sure. I don't quite remember. But that was one of the very first times, if not the first time, that I was cast as a male character. Because up until then, I was out, princesses and little girls and little girls. I certainly didn't, play any moms or anything in those days.
Yeah.
There weren't a lot of mom parts. And they said, would you like to try the little boy? And I said, because you have a little, rasp in your voice, and maybe we can, work on it and get it to sound authentic. And I said, yes, sure, I'd love to give it a try. And there was a wonderful, wonderful director there, and I cannot remember his name to save my life. He was just there for a little while, and then he was American, and then he went back to the States. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, it was the best advice anybody ever gave me in my life, bar none. There I am trying to get this little boy thing happening. And he said, when you think of performing as a little boy, it's not so much the sound of your voice. You've already got that little raspy thing in your voice. You've already got that. Don't even worry about that. What it is the attitude. So if you listen, and I want you to go home when you're, finished here, go to a school ground, listen to little boys talk and listen to little girls talk. and you'll hear that it's an energy punch that comes forward with a little boy, and it's kind of the opposite with a little girl. And I said, you mean like an exhalation and an inhalation? And he said, yeah, let's think of it that way. So he said, now try that line again, and think of it as if you're punching the line out at me. And I said, okay. And the line that I always use as my little boy reference is, oh boy, I did it, I got a home run. So what I did there was, all I did was I punched my energy out. So then if I were playing a little girl, I would pull my energy in, and I would keep it a little bit, it's still there, but it would be a little bit more contained. So, and my little girls will, But I think that it would be a really good, can you hear what, I'm just inhaling it all. I'm pulling it back, and you hear little girls, that it's almost as if they're out of breath, right? There's this little thing going on. Whereas a boy, the breath, it's at the front, and that's how, so it's more of a push and a pull.
That's fantastic.
So he was amazing, and it just literally changed my life. And then after that, I ended up doing, I think, probably more little boys than I did little girls.
Well, that's awesome that you were able to play Champ, because I absolutely like that. Beyond most shows from when I was really a young kid, that was probably my number one show. Like, I loved when the Care Bears went to they did the Alice in Wonderland, and there was a whole bunch of different ones, and I just absolutely love Care Bears. Like, I'm crazy about Care Bears. But anyway.
Oh, that's so good to hear that. You have no idea. That's wonderful.
Well, Susan, now that we've talked about Care Bears, there's another special show that I grew up loving. It was my first anime, Sailor Moon. And what role did you play on that amazing show?
That character was Sailor Jupiter. Sailor Jupiter, yes, Lita, one of my favorite characters ever. Now, the thing that I have to mention, too, is that this was not an original project, and so it was dubbing was involved. And so, again, we had to fly by the seat of our pants and just hope for the best. And one of the things that happened that we only realized later is that not only do most of us look appearance-wise, except for Serena, Sailor Moon, that doesn't it doesn't relate to that character with the actresses who played her. But for the Sailor Scouts, the inner senshi, everybody looked sort of like the character they were playing. And everybody sort of was like the character that they were playing. It was very interesting. So it was almost as if the producer said, this is going to be really difficult. We're under a very strong time constraints here. So it would be better if the people playing these parts don't have to turn themselves inside out to find that character or to perform that character, that it's right there as maybe typical of who they are. And there's a picture of Katie and me that was taken, I think, in the first, probably within the first 2 or 3 months. And it was one of the rare times that we actually recorded together. As I said, usually, especially on Sailor Moon, we went in individually. So this particular day, I guess we had a couple of scenes together, so we were recording together. And so somebody took a photograph. Actually, it was Roland Parliament, who was the director at the time. And there's Katie, who played Katie Griffin, who played Sailor Mars. And I had forgotten, but in those days she had hair that went down great lengths down the back of her body, like massive dark hair, just like Sailor Mars. And then I'm standing beside her, and I had forgotten that my hair used to be long enough that I could put it up in a ponytail, and it was brown in those days. And I looked and I said, well, isn't that incredible? Look at how much I look like Sailor Jupiter look how much Katie looks like Sailor Mars. There's got to be something to this. I don't think this is, circumstantial or coincidental. And so I think that, in a way, helped us to bring a little bit of ourselves to it, because it was so close to it. We were playing people who were so close to ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. I did acting in high school, and I ended up directing my senior year. And I always told my actors that I believe 50% of every character is what you bring to the table, and 50% is already what's pre-established per the script. This is the structure of the character, but 50% of that, and that's why I think when casting directors cast people, that's why they go through thousands of people sometimes for a role, because they are looking for that 50% that will fill the gap and make that whole 100% of a character, because they are looking for something that completes what they've already structured.
That is very interesting. That is very interesting. No, and it makes a lot of sense. And there's another thing too that I like, that it doesn't really work as well in animation. But certainly, if you're speaking of film work, I like it when a director casts against type.
Okay.
So I was just, and I'm so stupid of me, I've forgotten the name of the movie, but it was a million years ago. And Mary Tyler Moore, was America's sweetheart.
Yeah.
The sweetest, kindest. That was her image. That was her brand. And this director chose to cast her in this role of a very cold and isolated and strict, overbearing woman. And everyone said, "You what? You're casting who to play this part?" And he said, "I think that anybody who has a persona that is so positive and so upbeat and so everlastingly smiley and sweet and kind has something that's every bit as dark as they are, as the light that they show buried deep within them. And I want to tap into that." And she gave, one of the best performances ever. You just think, this is not Mary Tyler Moore. And I remember thinking, wow, because a lot of times I think that actors are overlooked in certain situations, that perhaps if more directors were like this gentleman, and it's like, what an idiot I am. Not only do I not remember the film, but I don't remember the director.
That's okay.
But I'll look it up and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
If more directors were like that, then actors would get to really stretch their wings. I'm sure when Mary Tyler Moore received that script, she thought, oh my, she must have gone through the roof with joy, because finally she was going to get to do what she was trained to do, which was to, be an actor. And when she was cast in it and they offered it to her, she must have been just absolutely over the moon and scared, because it was such a departure. So anyway, that's really off topic. I'm sorry I went down that road.
No, it made me really think, because I'm thinking, my philosophy that I shared with you on the 50% thing came when I was about 18, I think 18, 19 in high school. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because, what is acting all about? Acting is about stepping out of your comfort zone and becoming something that you're not, because it's acting,
Exactly.
So I really like that, because I never thought of that perspective before. And I think it's extremely relevant, especially if somebody listens to this show and decides one day to become a director. Maybe they'll hear this advice that you've shared with us and be like, hey, I remember what Susan Roman taught me on that episode on Who Did That Voice, and seriously, you never know. I mean, I'm going to totally cast everybody in this thing as opposites. Look, you're happy, you're going to play sad. You're sad, you're going to play happy. But that's where acting really comes in, because if that's not you, they're actually being stretched to use their skills that they were trained to use as actors. And I love that. That's fantastic, Susan. Thank you.
Oh, listen. Thank you. Thank you for leading us down the garden path of conversation.
Well, you're just giving me all these mind-blowing facts of awesomeness, and I'm just like, wow, okay, I'm totally learning something hardcore today, and I'm like, wow, I was not expecting this awesome lesson of education. So, But, Susan, you've shared some awesome stories with us from some amazing shows that you've been on. And, Care Bears and Sailor Moon and Strawberry Shortcake. And what kind of advice would you give to somebody who might be interested in going into the voiceover career? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that question. Blah, blah. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's looking at potentially joining the voiceover industry as a career?
There are so many different words of advice that I could give, and knowing me, I'll give me an hour. Pardon me. Sorry, I keep
take the floor.
I'm getting over a cold here. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Coughing in your ear.
Oh, you're fine.
I think it's this is an odd thing, but I really think that one of the most important things is to feel a sense of belief in the way you sound. So many times I've been coaching people and they get in front of the microphone and they put the headsets on, and I can see that they, without even realizing it, they're tilting away from the microphone. They're pushing their bodies back, and I'll stop and I'll say, so you know what, you're going off mic now. So if you could just try to stay, and I'll show them the parameters, where they have to be. And sure enough, they start leaning backwards. And it took a little while for me to cotton on to what was going on. But finally I did. And I said, are you pulling yourself back from the microphone because you don't like what you're hearing? And the answer was yes. And I thought, I don't know how to respond to that, because you have to love what you're hearing. And if you don't love what you're hearing, then maybe you shouldn't do voice work. So it's not that I want everybody to say, oh, listen to my beautiful, melodious voice. Isn't it gorgeous? I don't mean that at all. In fact, that's every bit as horrible. Somebody who just has a voice and throws it around with absolutely no heart and soul underneath it or behind it. But if you are disturbed by the sound that you're hearing in your headsets when you're working, then you're not going to give the best performance you can. You're going to always be holding back. So like those students who are first starting, were pulling their bodies away from the microphone so that they could hear less of themselves. For my part, I want to hear every single ounce of what I'm saying and doing. I have to hear it, because if I don't hear it, then I'm flying blind. Then I don't know if what I'm feeling is actually coming across. And also, it's as if that little sound that I'm hearing in my headsets, that is my voice, and it's and I keep using these words, it's my heart and my soul are coming through the sound that's coming out of me. And I have to have total 100% belief in that sound. Does that make any sense at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because if you're not fully hearing yourself, how do you know if you're good or if you need to correct it?
Well, that is so, you're right on the money. I mean, that is so necessary. You won't be able to fix it or correct it or hear if it's working.
Yeah.
But you're also cutting off a part of yourself. So it's as if, I don't know, it's as if you've decided that you would like to be a diver, but you don't really like water. Okay, it can work, but it's not ideal. So that's what I'm saying about the intimacy of that's what it is. It's this sense of intimacy when you are standing in front of a microphone and you're performing or you're reading or whatever it is that you're doing. If you're afraid of what you're hearing, you are going to lose a good portion of the incredible creative energy that could come out of you. Whereas if you're really into it and you're really connected to it, the most amazing things will happen. And you'll think, did I just do that did that just happen? It happened because I was connected.
Yeah.
I was connected to the character, and it's all this creative process, and things just happen. but they're not going to happen if you're tight and holding back, right?
Absolutely.
So the other thing too is practice. Just read. Even if you don't want to do animation, if you'd like to be an announcer, a TV, radio announcer, read out loud. Read the paper, read a book, read a magazine. Read out loud constantly so that it becomes very, very comfortable for you, number one, to hear yourself. Pick up your cell phone, record messages to yourself, listen to them back. Listen to what are you hearing when you listen back? What's coming across? Is that a relaxed sounding voice, or is it very pinched and tight? Can you hear the stress and strain in your voice? Are you pushing too much? Are you not pushing enough? And so it's all a part of a process where you're trying to become more familiar with who you are as an actor and who you are as a human being, because you've got this voice that you have nothing to do with it. It's inherited. It's there. It's in your vocal cords. It comes out of your head in a certain way. You can move it around and do all sorts of things with it, but your basic voice, the voice that is you, is your gift. And you have to think of it that way, always as something positive and something that you want always to connect with.
Absolutely, Susan. Well, thank you so much for giving such a deep perspective on, advice for individuals who might be considering this industry as a career option, because, it is something that they have to realize, is it something that they're going to love and want to do with a passion, or is it something they're going to say, you know what, this really isn't for me, let me find what is, so.
Exactly, yeah, and it might lead somewhere else. That's the thing, and you never know what you're going to find, little pathways off the main pathway.
Absolutely. You never know what life will bring your way, huh?
That's true.
Well, Susan, do you have a website or social media for fans to reach out to you at, or if somebody was inquiring about potentially hiring you for a fan favorite, fan-made project or a professional project for voiceover?
Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. Even as we speak, I am putting together my professional website.
Oh, amazing.
Which is, I can't believe that I was actually able to get my own name. It was a domain that had not been used, so it's not up and running, but it is going to be simply SusanRoman.com.
Okay.
And believe me, the day
I
that I
can't believe
found
that's already taken.
well, now it's taken, but it wasn't. I mean, I said, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to use my own name. Oh, my God. And with a .com at the end of it.
Yeah,
hello.
That is fantastic, and that's really hard to believe that somebody didn't snatch that up. So that's great.
So that's going to be up and running very, very soon, and of course it's going to be interactive, and it's going to be wonderful.
Excellent.
Can't wait to,
Excellent. I cannot wait to check out your website when it's up. So Susan Roman, that's just SusanRoman.com.
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, Susan, thank you so much for your time today. I have one final question before we let you go.
Okay.
The question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Oh, my. The legacy that I want to leave behind. Well, actually, I get to meet quite a few Sailor Moon fans. I'm very, very lucky that way. And when I realized, after speaking with them and when speaking with them, that they took comfort from the character that I played, that they were not as afraid when they listened to the character that I played talk, that they felt less lonely, that they could relate to the fact that she had anger management issues, to the fact that she was so tall and kind of so different from everybody else. And when I realized that I did something that affected people in a positive way, I can't think of a better legacy than that. I cannot possibly think of a better legacy. And the fact that I am now getting the opportunity to actually meet people who were positively affected by not only Sailor Jupiter, but by Sailor Moon, by the whole thing, the empowerment of girls. Yes, they wear short skirts, but that's another story. And Yeah, it's funny that it's taken 20-odd years to realize that something you did made people feel good. So that's good enough for me.
Absolutely, and I think that's a fantastic legacy, and the impact you've had on people has definitely had a long-lasting effect, and I think it will be something that will go years into the future and will still affect people probably 100 years from now, so.
Oh, well, you're a sweetheart. That's very nice to say. That would be a nice thought.
Well, you're very welcome, Susan. And thank you so much for giving us some of your valuable time to be on the show today.
Listen, this has absolutely been terrific. You've asked wonderful questions, and you are a very, very good listener. I like it. No, well, that's a rare thing nowadays. So, thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, Susan, thank you so very much for your precious time today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show. Would you please just give us a closeout today as Sailor Jupiter?
Sailor Jupiter! Well, I think this has been a terrific time. This is an incredible show. Who did that voice? Who did that voice? What a great idea. Trenton, I gotta say, you kind of remind me of my old boyfriend. But anyway, I digress. I gotta go. I gotta bake some cookies. I gotta kick some butt. Thanks a lot, Trenton.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Susan Roman, the voice of Sailor Jupiter. And if you did, please stop on by my Contact Me page at www.whodidthatvoice.co. I'd love to hear from you. A question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Tuesday for our next special guest, Ron Rubin, the voice of Artemis from Sailor Moon. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.